way more fun than climbing stairs.
How do I do it? Hey, we're back with another video. It's fucking Spider-Man. So here we have another video about time, but today it's going to be a much more positive one. We're going to be talking about video games that have aged incredibly well. Those video games that have aged like a fine wine. When I'm feeling unhealthy and I want some spicy nuggets and some alcohol, wine is absolutely my alcohol of choice, specifically red wine. And when it ages, it usually ages incredibly well, and it becomes even tastier and better in quality. And video games sometimes are no different. There are plenty of video games that have aged like total dog shit, where they might have been great when they came out, but nowadays are a nearly unplayable broken mess. But some video games are the complete inverse, where they were great then and they might even be better now. And if a game is able to hold up 10, 15, 20 years later, that really is a testament to the game's overall quality. And those are the retro games that, in my opinion, are absolutely worth your time. So today we're going to be talking about 10 great games that have aged incredibly well. This list is in no particular order, and I've tried to grab games from nearly every genre, so there's a little something for everybody. But something all these games have in common is that they were playable then, and they're very much playable nowadays. I also want to clarify that to get on this list, the game needs to be at least 15 years old, so you're not going to see no PS4 games or anything like that. So with that in mind, please let me know down below of some games that have aged incredibly well. I would love to get a discussion going. Maybe there'll be a part 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 even. Let's see what happens. Oh, and if you celebrate it, happy Thanksgiving as well. With that, please like, share, comment, subscribe. I got the Patreon and the Super Thanks. Any support is truly greatly appreciated. I also have a Discord where we're talking games and no drama. And so with that, let's get to the games. Now, when thinking of games that have aged incredibly well, one that immediately always comes to mind for me personally is Half-Life 2. Half-Life 2 really is, all these years later, still one of the GOATs of first-person shooters. The Half-Life series in general is just kind of goated, but when you look at the entire series, the one that is clearly aged the best of them all is Half-Life 2. And here we are 20 plus years later, and I still think it's a fantastic shooter in just about every aspect. It holds up graphically. The combat is just as solid as it always was, the level design is still incredible, and the game has an immaculate atmosphere and story that's never really been replicated on the same level all these years later. The plot and world building of Half-Life 2 has always been something special, and it really doesn't matter how many years it's been, I think it still absolutely holds up. And there's so many memorable moments and set pieces that are legit some of the most legendary moments of any video game. When it comes to the combat of Half-Life 2, I'll be the first to admit that it's never been its strongest suit, but I think it's more than sufficient enough. The AI is decent, the weapons still feel nice enough, and at times have a rather satisfying punch, and all of the weapons are just so legendary at this point that it feels like each weapon can really do no wrong, especially the gravity gun. Like, all these years later, it's still a great implementation of physics, and using the gravity gun is still super fun. While the combat might not necessarily blow you away, I still think it is very much enjoyable. I also think the level design is rather enjoyable. Half-Life 2's just always had this really natural, seamless level design that I think really stands the test of time. You don't ever find yourself really getting lost, and while it is rather linear, it also just feels really smooth. All of these areas connect to one another, and it just makes the progression and the pacing really great. This game also has a lot of variety, it's constantly keeping things interesting, and everything's actually very well implemented. It's just one of those FPS games that really doesn't show its age. It was considered a masterclass at the time, and all these years later, I mean, I'm still ranting and raving about it because it's so good. This truly has always been one for the ages. So for this one, I'm actually going with a double header. I'm going with Silent Hill 2 and 3, two of my absolute favorite horror games of all time, and yeah, I very much think they hold up even nowadays. Now, I didn't play Silent Hill back in the day. I actually didn't play all of the Silent Hills until the 2020s, and was absolutely blown away with just how good Silent Hill 2 and 3 were. And it made me very much realize that, yeah, these games are really something special. While I can't say the same about the rest of the Silent Hill series, I think Silent Hill 2 and 3 are more than playable nowadays. And I would say that they're some of the most accessible horror games from the 2000s in general. Plenty of horror games have not aged well, whether it's the tank controls, the obtuse puzzles, the confusing level design, or general lack of save points. It's not always super easy to go back to some of these older horror titles, but with Silent Hill 2 and 3, I really didn't feel that whatsoever. I also think graphically both of these games have aged quite well. Sure, they're not exactly lookers nowadays, and the Silent Hill 2 remake obviously blows away the original, but both of these games still have unique art styles and aesthetics that very much do stand the test of time. I think the character models were also some of the best looking character models of the entire generation, especially the third game. Like, Heather just looks great. And the animations were pretty solid as well, which makes it all the creepier when you start seeing enemies doing these surreal, unnatural movements. It's pretty jarring and it can add to the game's scares, and that's what's crazy is all these years later, I think both of these games are still pretty scary, especially the third one. I would say Silent Hill 3 is one of the scariest games I've ever played. It's probably the scariest in the entire series. That or the original, low-key, and if the game was able to scare me 20 plus years later, I think the game's going to be able to scare me forever. And what's nice is that, again, both of these games are very much playable. You don't have to use tank controls. I think the level design is actually very good in both of these games, especially the second one. Both of these games feature puzzle difficulty, so if you don't want the puzzles to be incredibly obtuse and difficult, you don't have to have them that way. I never found myself lost or unsure of where to go or what to do next, and while the combat is easily the most dated element of both of these games, I'm not going to sit here and act like it's bad either. It takes a second to get used to, but that's just a second. The combat is rather shrimplistic, and the moment you get a gun is the moment it becomes a lot more enjoyable, which is pretty quick in both of these games. And lastly, I think something that makes both of these games timeless is the music. The music is just so unbelievably good in both of these games. I've had the music in tons of my videos for this reason, like Akira really cooked here, and this is his best work. It doesn't matter that the Silent Hill 2 remake's out and that one day they'll probably remake the third one as well. These original games are still very much worth playing, and I think they're some of the finest horror games ever. So to shake things up a bit, we have Batman Arkham Asylum. Yeah, Arkham Asylum is more than 15 years old. It's crazy to say that. I very much remember when this game came out and people were going, holy batshit, man, this is absolutely incredible. And you know what? The game is still really freaking good. It's still one of the best superhero games ever, it's still one of the best licensed games ever, and it's always going to be. There have been rumors for some time that they're going to be remaking Arkham Asylum, and all I gotta say is, why? This game holds up in so many elements. I can't really think of an area where the game doesn't hold up if we're being honest here. The game looked great for the time. I still think it looks pretty good nowadays. Yeah, it very much does look like an Unreal Engine 3 game, but nowadays, it's pretty obvious when something's an Unreal Engine 5 game. I guess we really haven't changed. But this game also had a really great color palette, aesthetic, and vibe to it. Like, Arkham Asylum is a freaking mood, and a good one at that. You're not going to find anybody complaining about the game's presentation all these years later, and you're not going to find anybody complaining about the gameplay either. It really got the whole Arkham series started, and in my opinion, they nearly perfected it on the first try. I think Arkham City is a little better, but Arkham City is also not over 15 years old. I would say that the only area where Arkham Asylum is lacking is the boss fights, and even at the time, people said that the boss fights were not very good. All these years later, they're still not very good. But I wouldn't say that that's an issue due to the game's age. They just weren't very well done boss fights. But everything else, oh, it is so good. The combat is still phenomenal all these years later. The Batman combat was low-key revolutionary. That's so many games copied going forward. The stealth is still really solid. You absolutely get to feel like Batman. Grappling around and taking dudes out one at a time, it's still incredibly fun and satisfying. The exploration is still really great. The game's overall pacing is really solid. The side content, while limited, is still really fulfilling. And the game is relatively straightforward. They don't throw any gimmicks in there. There's no other gameplay styles. There's nobody else to play as. You are just Batman doing Batman shit the entire time. And when it comes to the story, it's easily one of the best stories a Batman video game could have. Again, while I slightly prefer Arkham City over this, I still think Asylum kicks some serious ass. And I got zero problem recommending it to any modern gamer. And at the very least, this game has actually been re-released. Unlike the other games I've talked about so far, you can play it on a modern console and it's very much as playable as it always was. In fact, it's probably better than it's ever been, unless you're playing on the Switch. I really don't trust that version. Either way though, Arkham Asylum, oh, it's one of the best. Alright, so you knew I had to throw a 3D platformer in there, and we've got Jak and Daxter and the Precursor Legacy. Now, I love the entire Jak and Daxter series. No matter how much Jak 2 makes me want to rip my fingernails off, I still love it to pieces. But let's be real here, which Jak and Daxter is aged the best? The original. And I've always thought that the original is high-key the best in the entire series. Like, it's still very much playable nowadays, it's incredibly accessible since it's even on PS4 and 5, and it's simply put, one of the greatest 3D platformers of all time. Graphically, I think the game holds up quite well, the water still looks really great, and there's plenty of good looking environments here. Yeah, the character models are a bit dated, but it's nothing too jarring. But something that I think holds up incredibly well with the original Jak and Daxter is the game's tone and atmosphere. It's a lot more light-hearted than 2, 3, really the rest of the series, and I've always very much enjoyed these Saturday morning cartoon vibes that it always gave off. And when it comes to the gameplay, yeah, 100%, I think it still holds up incredibly well. No, you don't get any guns. Outside of a few sections, you aren't really driving around in any vehicles, there's no car combat, there's not even a big open world to explore. Instead, what you have is just a straight up 3D platformer where you get dropped into these non-linear levels and are told to collect these power cells, and you'll need enough of them if you want to progress through the game. Yeah, at times it can feel a bit like a throwback in terms of progression where it's just collect so much of this item in order to progress, but I don't think many games have ever done it better than the original Jak and Daxter. Something though that also holds up incredibly well is this game's controls and feel. It still is one of the finest feeling PS2 platformers of them all, and I think you'll always have a really good handle on Jak and his movements. I also think the progression is pretty solid as you're going from area to area, and they're all incredibly different. You're getting new powers, you're doing something different every level. The game likes to keep things interesting. Yeah, there are some other gameplay styles that show up here in some mini games, but I don't think these are too intrusive, and I think these have aged decently well also. Maybe at this point I'm just blinded by nostalgia since I have been playing it for almost 20 years, but I do think it is rather enjoyable even nowadays, and I think just about anybody can enjoy this one, especially if you like platformers of any kind. And all the bullshit and nonsense from Jak 2 and 3 aren't here whatsoever. So I wanted to throw at least one 2D game in here, and I have Castlevania Aria of Sorrow. If you're unfamiliar with this one, it was the third Game Boy Advance title in the Castlevania series, and it very much is a Metroidvania in the style of Symphony of the Night. But I would argue that this game has actually aged quite a bit better than Symphony of the Night. Like, Symphony of the Night has aged incredibly well, but it very much does have its moments where it feels like a 90s game, like where you have to wait for the clock, and the game has a few moments of you going, how are we just supposed to know that? Aria of Sorrow didn't have this for me, and I think it's unironically one of the best Metroidvanias I've ever played. It's up there with the Hollow Knight games. It legit is actually really good. Obviously, graphically, it very much does look like a Game Boy Advance screen, and if you're blowing it up on a big screen, it's going to look a little crunchy, but I also think that graphically it's aged a lot better than the two prior Game Boy Advance games. So yes, you're going to have to get over the hurdle that the graphics have aged a little bit, but you know what hasn't? The gameplay. The gameplay still feels really great. The movement is incredibly tight and responsive, the controls feel nice, and killing shit does feel good in this game, and you'll be doing plenty of that. You'll get plenty of abilities and weapons, and of course you'll be doing lots of backtracking, but thankfully the level design is kinda peak. It's some of the best level design of the entire Castlevania series. I never really found myself getting lost in this game, which is something I can't say about some of the other Castlevania Metroidvanias, and I thought it was always pretty clear where you were supposed to go next, or the general direction. And then the game very much does reward exploration, going off the beaten path, and going back to earlier areas with new abilities, especially when it's not required for progression. This game has genuinely some of the most satisfying progression of any Metroidvania I've ever played. When you start the game, you don't really have many abilities and you can't do a lot, but by the end of it, you are just a walking tank. Seriously, you can just destroy everything, and it's pretty satisfying. I think the progression and difficulty are absolutely on point here, and if you're somebody that likes Metroidvanias whatsoever, I think this is one you should really seek out to play. It's also very accessible nowadays thanks to the Advance Collection. You can play this on really any modern console, and you know what? That can only be a good thing. Konami, they got a lot of problems, but their collections have been pretty solid. I don't think anyone's gonna deny that. Well, Jak and Daxter wasn't the only 3D platformer. We've got the original Banjo-Kazooie, specifically the Xbox Live re-release that came out in the mid to late 2000s. The original N64 game is still great. It's a masterpiece in its own right, but the Xbox 360 version is just so much better, and it's aged much better as well. And it also addresses some of my only issues with the original game. The game looks better, it runs a hell of a lot better, the frame rate is really smooth, it controls better, and it also saves which notes you collect in these levels. And speaking of collecting, That's what this game is all about. Yeah, it might feel a little dated in that aspect that it really is just about collecting everything, but very few games have done this better than Banjo-Kazooie. Like, the collecting is just kind of peak here. I think the controls are some of the best of any 3D platformer. Banjo and Kazooie have a really great moveset that is constantly expanding, and all of the levels are legit legends. There's not a single bad level here. Some levels are clearly better than others, I will admit that, but a bad level? No, you won't find a bad one here. Even the swimming is decent here. How many 3D platformers outside of Spyro have decent swimming? I'm not going to act like it's anything great, but this is a lot more enjoyable than plenty of other games, including Mario games. Even though all of these levels are just big open areas, they have very tight design. They do a great job of funneling you through them and constantly rewarding you for any kind of exploration. You go even a little off the beaten path and you're usually rewarded for it, and it feels good to be rewarded for it. While the platforming is solid and a lot of the main collectible, the Jiggies, are obtained from just normal platforming, the game also has plenty of other challenges and little mini games that show up here, but it doesn't go nuts like Banjo-Tooie does. I think there's a healthy balance here, and I think collecting all of these Jiggies has actually aged pretty well. I love Banjo-Tooie probably more than Kazooie. It's got an ambitious, impressive scope, but I'll be the first to admit that it is not aged as well as the original. The original is still as playable as it gets nowadays, and I really got absolutely no problem recommending it. The game is still incredibly charming as well. Like, it doesn't matter how dated it might look, the charm will always bleed through your monitor or TV. Banjo is one of the most lovable characters ever. That's why people went crazy when he got into Smash, because him and Kazooie are great, and their games are great too, outside of Nuts and Bolts. And if you're somebody that enjoys platforming in video games whatsoever, this is another must play, and it really does stand the test of time. So here's one that I just don't talk enough about, and that is the original BioShock. I think the original BioShock has actually aged incredibly well. I'd even argue that it's aged better than BioShock Infinite. The game was considered a certified masterpiece when it released, and all these years later I got no problem saying that it still is a masterpiece. It still has one of the greatest atmospheres, environments, and stories to a video game. Rapture is still amazing in every sense. It's still this depressing, dilapidated, rundown environment that you'll want to explore every nook and cranny of, and the game very much rewards you for that also. The plot really is legendary, and the plot twist that happens 3/4 of the way through the game is still one of the best of any video game. I remember how shocked I was the first time it happened to me, and all these years later I'm still like, damn, that shit was good. But the story, that's a really good one. And when it comes to the combat, yeah, it's not the best. Combat has never been the strongest suit of BioShock. Some of the weapons don't feel the strongest, and enemies can be a bit spongy, especially towards the end of the game. But what BioShock does to make up for this is just how creative you can get, and how you can really utilize the environment to the fullest. There's of course your regular ass weapons, but there's all the plasmids, and using these and combining these with the other weapons, it's really enjoyable even all these years later. While there's plenty of fentanyl crack fiend shitters that are running around Rapture that you can own pretty quickly, there's also the Big Daddies, and the Big Daddies are still these big imposing creatures even all these years later, and they can still rock your shit. They still got no problem ripping your dick off and slapping you around with it. Like, these guys can really drill a new asshole into you. But you also can come really prepared and set traps and, again, utilize what's around you to the best of your ability. And after you defeat them, you get to decide what you want to do with the little sisters, even if it doesn't really make any sense to harvest them. Like, it really doesn't make any sense. You get more from not harvesting them, but hey, illusion of choice. You do get a different ending, a pretty wild ending if you do choose to harvest them. Graphically, I think the game very much still holds up. It's still got some really excellent lighting and environments to it. The detail is actually really high, especially for the time, and I think the animation is pretty solid also. The music, it's kind of legendary stuff here. This game in general is pretty legendary. I'm sure some people will say that it hasn't aged the best because of the last bit of the game where it's not as enjoyable as the first half, but while it is true that I very much do prefer the first half of BioShock to the later half, I still think it's aged really well. Just know that the second half, yeah, it might not be as good as the first, but the game overall is still really great. And it has actually been re-released onto modern consoles. I know those versions are a little iffy, but hey, at least there's something. At least you can play them on a modern console. And so here's one that I just love to pieces, and that's Star Fox 64. It can be the N64 version or the 3DS version, it really doesn't matter. Star Fox 64 actually does hold up incredibly well, and it's arguably the best rail shooter ever made. I'm not even capping. space shooters really never got any better than this. Obviously, graphically, you know, it's a bit dated, the ship looks a bit primitive, some of the environments look pretty basic, but if you're able to look past that, I think you'll find a really nice aesthetic and charm that isn't present in a lot of games nowadays. But when it comes to the gameplay, 100% this holds up. It still feels great, it plays great, it's incredibly satisfying, the game is super replayable, all of the different paths are totally worth exploring, and even though you can beat the game in like an hour, this is one you'll be coming back to for many, many years. I've been coming back to this game pretty much my entire life at this point, and I always enjoy it. I enjoy seeing all the different areas, and I've always enjoyed just blowing everything up and trying to get as many points as I possibly can. Yeah, of course, points are a little dated nowadays, but this is one of those games where I think it's pretty fun to try to get a high score and just see everything that you can possibly see. The pacing is really great, progression is some of the best of any rail shooter, it's constantly keeping things interesting, there's so many memorable set pieces, moments, boss fights, music, you name it, it's all really great stuff. This is one of those quintessential rail shooters that I think everybody should play. It's just so good. And the 3DS version is honestly even better. It looks better, it plays better, the frame rate is a lot more consistent, and it very much still contains the original game's strengths. I don't even really like the Star Fox series at this point. I've realized I dislike just about every single game, but you know what? I'm never going to dislike Star Fox 64. Man, they cooked so hard with this one, and all these years later, no other Star Fox game is cooked anywhere near as good as 64. And it's also on the Switch, so you can play it on a modern console. Isn't that great? So here's one that's just barely over the 15 years old, and that's Red Dead Redemption 1. I think the OG Red Dead Redemption has actually aged pretty well, better than really every Grand Theft Auto outside of 5 if we're being real here. And I'm sure I've upset a number of people by saying that, so let me explain. The story of Red Dead Redemption, do we really need to say any more about that? It's one of the best of any video game. John Marston, he's really great. Sure, he ain't no Arthur Morgan, he doesn't have the depth or complexity or all of that Arthur has, but his game's also quite a bit shorter. And RDR2 came out like 8 years later. What I'm trying to say is story, characters, plot, progression, all of that is really great stuff and still very much holds up. And when it comes to the gameplay, I think it does as well. While it doesn't have the biggest open world or the open world with the most depth or complexity, and it doesn't look as outstanding as RDR2 does, and it doesn't feel as lived in, I still think it's a pretty great open world and one of the best of the entire generation. It does a great job at capturing the Wild West, and I think it's an excellent setting. I think the game's controls have aged a little bit in that they feel a bit sluggish and take a minute to get used to, but it's nowhere near as slow, stilted, and clunky as, say, GTA 4's controls, and riding the horse I thought was way more enjoyable than driving a car in GTA 4. I also think the combat and general gunplay has aged incredibly well. Taking cover feels nice, the guns feel nice, Deadeye is still really great, and again, it might not go crazy like RDR2, but I still think it feels, looks, and plays nice even nowadays. I also like that the game is not like 60 hours long like RDR2. I've always really appreciated the pacing and length of this game. It's like 12 to 15 hours long. You could probably even beat it faster if you just beeline the main story, and it's one of those games that outside of the first like hour when you're on the farm is very much all killer, no filler here. Like, all of the missions are meaningful, they all progress the story in a meaningful way, and I think they're all really great. Graphically, this one still holds up really nice. It's still a great looking game, and it's always had a really good aesthetic to it. It's also widely available. It's finally on PC all these years later. It's on Switch, it's on modern consoles. Yeah, you can play it on pretty much everything. There's also Undead Nightmare, which I think hasn't aged as well as the original game, but it's still pretty enjoyable too. But at the end of the day, RDR1, I mean, what else really needs to be said about it? It's an excellent game. And then to finish off things, we got Super Monkey Ball 2, one of my favorite games of all time. This game has absolutely aged like a fine wine, and every time I come back to it, it's somehow better and better. It's funny, as I've gotten older and the game's gotten older, I just have more love and admiration for it. When I was a kid, I actually didn't like the game. It was too hard, it was frustrating, and I got rid of it. But then as a teenager, I got it back and oh, I loved it. I loved it to pieces, and then as an adult, I love it even more. And nowadays, I would say that it's easily one of the greatest GameCube games, no, one of the greatest games like ever made. Super Monkey Ball 2 is one of the GOATs immediately, and it's aged so well. It's aged better than any of the other Monkey Ball games. I think it's way better than any of the other Monkey Ball games. It's super easy to pick up and understand, like Monkey in ball goes to end of stage. That's it. That's the objective for the entire game. But then you know what's aged incredibly well about it? The controls, the simplicity, and the physics. The physics are so goated in this game. It's the best physics of any Monkey Ball game. They've never been able to recreate the physics of this. Like, it just comes together in the most satisfying of ways. Sure, some levels are not as obvious as others, and at times it might be even a little confusing, but if you think about it for even like 30-40 seconds, you're probably going to be able to figure out how you're supposed to get the monkey to the goal, and it's so good. It's so satisfying. I just love the controls and I love how this game feels. It also has a really great art style, aesthetic, presentation. The music is goated. Like, we could be here all day raving about Super Monkey Ball 2. I've expressed my love for this game many times over. I will continue to. It's truly just a phenomenal game that I have no problem recommending to anybody. Unfortunately, this original release isn't the most accessible. There was Super Monkey Ball Deluxe, which was on the Xbox and PS2, which is sufficient enough, but those are all pretty old consoles. If you want to play Super Monkey Ball 2 nowadays, yeah, you really got to hook up the old consoles or get on an emulator. There was a remake of Super Monkey Ball 1 and 2, but man, this just doesn't do it for me. It's nowhere near as good as the original, sadly. And at this point, I would be shocked if it ever got a re-release. So you're either going to need to go game hunting, or yeah, you're going to need to just go to an emulator, which sucks. But hey, at least you're doing it for a game that, in my opinion, is 110% worth it. And whenever I play this game, I always utter those cursed words where I'm like, man, they just don't make them like they used to. There's never really been a game to hit like Monkey Ball 2, at least in my opinion, and who knows if we'll ever get another that will. But anyway, that's enough of Monkey Ball. That's enough of games that have aged like a fine wine. If you made it to this part of the video, you can comment spicy nuggets, because you know what I'm going to go have for lunch? I'm not going to have that. I'm actually going to have some greens for the first time in a second. I'm also going to be having Thanksgiving.